Hi there, welcome to English Success. In today's video, I will provide a detailed guide with tips and techniques for the listening test, tailored specifically for absolute beginners. I hope you are ready. Now, let's get started. So the 4-step process that I have is, step number 1, carefully review the instructions. Step number 2, predict the content in the spaces. Step 3, listen for synonyms and paraphrasing. Step 4, tip on staying focused and locating questions. I'm going to explain each of these steps in detail. But before we start, let me briefly introduce the listening test. The test lasts for 30 minutes and consists of 4 sections. You will listen to a variety of recordings, including monologues and conversations between 2 or more people. There are 40 questions in total, and it's important to note that each recording is played only once. Next, we will use sample test as an example for our explanation. The material we'll be using is from Cambridge 16, Test 1, Section 1. Let's take a look at Part 1. The first thing to do is to read the instructions carefully. The instructions are simple. They tell us to complete the notes below. The next sentence is slightly more important as it specifies the number of words we need to write. Here, it clearly states, write 1 word and/or a number, which means the answers could be a combination of these 3 formats. It's important to note that you should write down exactly what you hear without changing the word form. The 10 questions follow the same order as the recording, meaning you will hear the answer to the first question first, followed by the second, and so on. There will be no out-of-order questions. Part 1 is the easiest part of the listening test, so we aim to score as high as possible, ideally full marks. Now, let's talk about the strategies and techniques for resolve this type of question. You will have 30 to 40 seconds to read the questions before the recording starts. Use this time to predict the word class, for example, noun or verb, and singular or plural form for each space. This will help you focus throughout the recording. Let's look at a few examples. For instance, the first space is likely a noun, marked as N, and since it's preceded by N, it should start with a vowel sound, A, E, I, O, U. Similarly, the second space should also be a noun because it's described by the adjective tallest, and we know that adjectives typically describe nouns. Now, let's look at this 7th space. What part of speech do you think it should be? The answer is a verb marked as V. Here's the reasoning. The 7th space, along with the verbs build and program, forms a parallel structure, A, B, and C. In such structures, A, B, and C usually share the same part of speech. Since build is a verb, the 7th space should also be a verb, and so should program. This is how we predict the word class while reading the questions, which helps us locate the correct answers more accurately during the listening part. Another important tip is to avoid focusing solely on the space while listening. Instead, pay attention to the parts before and after the spaces as well. This is because we do not know which part of the sentence will be heard first. It could be the content before the space or the content after it. Therefore, you need to stay focused. Since the speakers do not use the same word, so we also need to be prepared to hear either the same word from the recording or a paraphrased synonyms version. This is crucial for success. To give you a better understanding, we'll now play the recording for the first 3 questions. The recording is about 1 minute long. You'll have 10 seconds to read the questions, and then we'll start the recording.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Hello, Children's Engineering Workshops.
Oh, hello. I wanted some information about the workshops in the school holidays.
Sure.
I have 2 daughters who are interested. The younger one's Lydia. She's 4. Do you take children as young as that?
Yes, our tiny engineers workshop is for 4 to 5-year-olds.
What sorts of activities do they do?
All sorts. For example, they work together to design a special cover that goes round an egg, so that when it's inside, they can drop it from a height and it doesn't break. Well, sometimes it does break, but that's part of the fun.
Right. And Lydia loves building things. Is there any opportunity for her to do that?
Well, they have a competition to see who can make the highest tower. You'd be amazed how high they can go.
Right.
But they're learning all the time as well as having fun. For example, one thing they do is to design and build a car that's attached to a balloon, and the force of the air in that actually powers the car and makes it move along. They go really fast too.
Okay, well, all this sounds perfect.
The listening part 1 is generally considered the easiest part, so let's reveal the answers. Did you do it correctly? There are 2 key points I need to emphasize. First, when listening, pay attention to the parts before and after the space, because we don't know which part we'll hear first. Second, since the speaker do not always use the same words, we need to pay attention to the parts before and after the space, because it may be either the same words from the transcript or paraphrased. All right, next, we'll pull up the transcript to compare it with the questions. This will give you the most clear understanding. First, let's look at question 1. The part before the space, create a cover, the noun cover, in the transcript remains unchanged. It's exactly the word cover. However, in the question, the word create isn't the same word in the recording. Instead, we hear design. The latter part of the sentence, so that they can drop it from the height, is unchanged in the transcript, but the phrase, it doesn't break, in the recording is paraphrased too, without breaking it. This is a relatively simple paraphrase. So, for the first question, there are both same words and paraphrasing. Also, we hear cover first, followed by drop it from the height, which aligns with the natural flow of the sentence. Thus, the first question is relatively easy. Now, let's move to question 2. The word tallest before the space corresponds to highest in the recording, another example of synonym. The word make is replaced by design or build in the transcript a common synonyms in reading and listening tasks. Looking at the sentence structure, when listening to the second sentence, the first part in the question is take part in a competition, followed by to build the tower. However, in the recording, the male speaker first says build a car, where build matches the build in the question. Then, when the female speaker responds, we hear they have a competition corresponding to competition in the question. Later, we hear highest tower. Although the order changes slightly, it's not significant enough to affect most test takers. Now, let's tackle question 3, which is the most challenging of the 3. Here, powered is a passive verb describing car, meaning the car is driven by force. But in the transcript, the active voice is used. The force of air powers the car. This is a classic example of paraphrasing in reading and listening, switching between active and passive voice. The question uses the passive, while the recording uses the active. These 3 questions illustrate the principle of paraphrasing and example of synonyms in listening tasks. How can we maintain focus and better locate the questions when we lose track? I have a useful technique to share. Pay attention to the words you can easily understand. These are called sequence prompt words. Next, I'll highlight these sequence prompt word in the transcript. By comparing them with the questions, you'll see why they're helpful. For example, the phrase Children's Engineering Workshop corresponds to the main heading. Then, Tiny Engineer Workshop matches the first subheading here. Further down, for example, corresponds to cover and egg in the question. The phrase dropped from a height aligns with the sentence in the question. Later, the word and appears, followed by building things, and further down, competition matches the words in the question. Finally, for example, and balloon power in the transcript correspond to power balloon in the third point of the question. As you can see, the sequence prompt words we've highlighted help us to locate the questions. By accurately catching these simple and easy words, we can guide our attention from the main heading to the subheadings and then to the first, second, and third points. These simple words greatly assist in question positioning. In this way, we can follow the sequence of the recording in a more structured manner, thereby increasing our chances of capturing the correct answers. As you can see, the words we highlighted earlier, such as, for example, and, are extremely simple. We can definitely recognize them. Compared to other more challenging vocabulary in the recording, it's much more efficient for us to focus on these simple and highly useful words. By keeping track of them, we can accurately identify each transition in recording, helping test takers understand exactly where they are in the recording at any given moment. By locking onto these sequence prompt words, we can direct our attention to a specific sentence. Then, the next step is to focus on this specific sentence to ultimately identify the answer. Did you enjoy this video? Was it helpful for you? I hope so. Please leave a comment below if you want to learn more about tips on multiple choices. Thanks so much for watching.